All right, and now we are live, Mehdi. And so the first question I want to ask you is really, why did you decide to leave one of the most exciting companies right now in AI, Google, to go work for an unknown Middle East company? So what happened there?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Daniel, for having me here, and it's a pleasure to be with you. It's a really good question, actually. A lot of folks didn't necessarily understand the thought process there. Mine was actually a bit simple. I was indeed in what I still believe is the world's leading research lab and one of the most amazing product companies of all times. And I was fortunate enough to run the product org for two of the most successful research labs that we've ever seen, right? DeepMind, Google Brain, that then merged to form what today is Google DeepMind. The thoughts in my head were, well, first, I like the very, very early stage things and help to build stuff from scratch. And then second is there was an opportunity to start something from scratch in the neighborhood where I had relocated and to do it with a very, very different setup. And so I summarize this sometimes with, would I have wanted to join Google in 1999 or in 2020? Would I have liked to join DeepMind in 2010 or when I joined in 2016? And so similarly, I thought, hey, I have the opportunity to build something in the space that I like and be incredibly early at it to help shape it up. And was lucky enough to have a lot of colleagues and stakeholders and an ecosystem that's incredibly supporting. And so, yeah, I made the jump. And fast forward a few quarters, not even years from when I did that, there is so much excitement about AI in the neighborhood that I'm in the region. I have tons of ex colleagues who are actually visiting almost every week and showing up. And so the early signs seem to show that I wasn't completely crazy when I did the change.
Cool. So can you explain why do you think that it's exciting for you, what you're currently building? So and what makes you think that AI71?
Next to Google, I don't know, right? Google is quite unique, etc. But definitely, we are in a phase of technology where research labs have made incredible strides in the AI space, and we have a bunch of tools that keep improving and improving constantly, and that help you do things that look like magic, right? If 6, 7, 5, 4 years ago, people had told you that you'd be able to have the kind of tools that you have now and that you'd have the acceleration that we are all witnessing, you probably wouldn't have believed them, right? And so the insight or the idea that we're working on is that the current phase of AI helps to add cognitive superpowers to humans, while the previous one was about automating repetitive tasks, right? And when you talk about cognitive type tasks, it means knowledge work if you're looking at the enterprise space. And so what we do at AI71 is that we take tools that have been built by the best research labs in the world, we combine them with other systems that our own research lab has developed. And then we work very closely with our design partners and early customers to help them benefit from these technologies. So if you think about some of our design partners, right, like they have functions like HR, marketing, sales, procurement, etc. And in a lot of these functions, all the employees are struggling with disparate systems, tons of documents, tight deadlines. They basically spend an inordinate amount of time doing very, very repetitive tasks that the tools of today can help you automate. And then if you take it a step further, in the company of tomorrow, you will have humans and non-humans collaborating. And this is something that hasn't been solved, right? The previous phase was about, oh, you used to write letters, here is an email. Or you used to have tables and write down the list of your customers, keep track of what they owe you, what you owe them, etc., in a piece of paper. Then you created CRMs and they used to be on-prem, then they became on the cloud, etc. But it's the same job that you were doing, you just do differently with digital tools. In this new phase, you will now have superpowers, right? Like you'll have colleagues that are digital. And so how do you work with them? How do you manage them? How do they maybe manage you? This means that you need to change completely the way that companies operate today. And this human machine interaction is just at its beginning. And that is the big challenge that we have given ourselves, that we want to help figure out how companies of tomorrow will operate.
And so how do you do that? So it's a bit confusing for me. Are you guys a service company? Are you a product company? Because you have the CPTO title, so you're both in charge of product and technology. So how many engineers work for you and product managers, and what do they do all day?
It's a really, really good question. And I have to admit that it can be it is normal that it's confusing because people are figuring out how to do this, right? So there is no cookie cutter approach or like cookbook recipe that you can apply. The way that we have organized ourselves, and we should note that we constantly rejig and adapt to the way that we are organized based on user feedback, customer feedback, and our own learnings, right? At the gist of it, so we have a horizontal group that builds the building blocks that are required to build the systems that we are developing for our customers. And these, you can think of them as intelligent assistants that knowledge workers have by their side and that help them do tasks, automate tasks, and simplify the way that they work. So this is one group, right? You can think of this one as a closer to a combination of applied research and product engineering and some PMs. Then we have a second layer where a lot of these systems need to be specialized for the task or the industry where you're applying them, because different people have different requirements. And so those are verticals like education, healthcare, construction, and so on and so forth. And then there's a third part, which maybe touches on something that you mentioned in the question, which is the adoption challenge. People are realizing that even if everybody's talking about AI, there is very little adoption, at least in the enterprise. And the main reason for that, based on our own experience, is that because we're changing the way people work, it is not straightforward to do that. If you give a tool to your HR department to infuse intelligence everywhere, it's not very clear to them how to use it. We met, for example, these like execs of multi-billion companies who say, I bought Copilot licenses, and sometimes it's other things, right? Like not to pick on Copilot, but I bought Copilot licenses for all my employees, and actually usage is very low. And the problem is, it's not about the technology, actually. It's a big change management exercise and helping figure out the human side of it. Like, how do I use these things? Is it just to help me write emails? Is it just to like help me write better reports, etc.? Or is there actually another way of doing this? And so we have this third part of the company that is made of folks who came from the consulting firms, mostly from like technical backgrounds, who help with this. Probably 10 years ago, people would have said digital transformation. Today, it's more like the AI infusion in these companies and big transformation programs. This is specific to us, right? Like it is linked to the fact that we are starting our journey with large companies, government entities, etc. There are other players who probably do the same thing as us from a technical perspective that are starting with like prosumers or maybe SMBs. And then at some point, they'll move on to large enterprises. And for these ones, they don't necessarily need to have deployment strategists and forward deployed engineers and all these types of folks. But in our case, our advantage is in that side of the space. And so that is why we're organized the way that we currently are.
All right, got it. So, and I'm picking a little bit on you on the product versus service, even though now every single AI company is also selling services. OpenAI is hiring, and Anthropic, they're hiring forward deployed engineers like crazy. The Mistral is apparently selling more service-based revenue than product-based. So, and you're right, the change management part of AI is so important that you have to have service to help your clients adopt AI. So the way I understand it is that you have both AI products and you have a service-based offering to help your clients adopt the products and change the way they interact with products.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And in reality, it is not new, right? You can have a technology, but you need it to be used and adopted. And in the early days, you have to help people understand the way that it will add value to them. And so you go with this early phase where it doesn't look very scalable. It is not the advice that people will tell you in some of the startups of the previous age or in some of the incubators of the previous age where it's do very, very scalable things. Actually, I believe that we have to do a number of non-scalable things until we figure things out and then replicate those. So yeah, you mentioned the guys at OpenAI, Anthropic, etc., who are heavily investing in forward deployed engineers at a bit like the Palantir model, right? But when I was at DeepMind, we had a group that worked really, really closely with our friends at Google. And so we worked with YouTube and search and Android and cloud, etc. And we had like teams of engineers who would embed with our partners in these various business units of Google and work really, really closely with them to add machine learning, back then like RL and deep learning, into their own operations and projects. We didn't call them forward deployed engineers, but it was right.
And so can you maybe explain the AI products that you're building? What are they? And I'm interested because you also build products at DeepMind. So what does it mean to build an AI product? Do you build a model? Is a model a product? Do you use someone else's model? Is the model a commodity? You have all those questions about where is the product, where is the application, where's the commodity? So I'm really interested to understand what's your view on that and how you're doing it now.
Yeah, it's a super interesting question, right? Probably different people will define products a bit differently. Ultimately, it is something that helps somebody solve some problem that they have, right? So you could think that a model is a product. You're building something that someone else will use. It's maybe not. Probably if you're doing that, your user is somebody that's using it to then build something on top for another one, right? So these are more like platforms that others use, but they also need a product mindset, right? Product, at the gist of it, basically is the group of folks in a company, technical company, that help figure out like why are we doing what we're doing and what are we actually doing. And then they collaborate with the engineers and the program managers and others to like get these things done. Going back to so the first thing is products come in different shapes and forms, and they are geared towards different types of users. I can build a model, have an API for developers to access it, and that is a product. And I can have a PM in charge of this. It will have its own go-to-market motion, its own way of growth, support, etc. I can also build a product that is a model plus a bunch of other things, as in I've added a UI, I'm solving, let's say, a coding assistant. So there will be a model below. I'll probably have added a bunch of other tools to it, specialized it a bit, have a different UI. This is another product. It includes a product that someone else has built like in the chain, but it's also a product. So that is the first thing. The second thing on your question about if models commoditize, is a product a model, or how do we think about this? The thing with these models is they come in different shapes, forms, and generations. So because we're so early in this race and space, every 6 months you have, give or take, you have a new generation of model in a given modality, right? So you'll have, recently there was Gemma 3, which is like a fantastic model. Just before in the summer, there was the GPT-5, etc. And Anthropic has their own, and then you have all the Chinese models that pop up and are also very good. So it is true that they commoditize quickly. However, there is a new generation coming quite soon, and the different labs ship their models at different times. So if you sit at the application layer, you have a huge choice to pick from, and you have to adapt to that. Then the last bit about like your question of like, what do we actually do? So we have our roots in a research lab, right? Like we are a spin out of a research lab that the UAE started in 2020. That's called TII, Technology Innovation Institute. That lab had an AI team that built models which are the Falcon models, which are open source models that were some of the leading models in the space since 2022. They also have a research team. So when you combine the models and search type tools, you start to get things that people call agents, right? And that have existed for a long time. So that is how we started in this agentic space from the beginning, because we just combined these two capabilities that we had. And so our product can be thought of as an agentic platform that helps knowledge workers automate bits and pieces of their work. And so if you sit in procurement, you probably receive a lot of emails with responses to RFPs, prices, contracts, and various other data points. And you have to decide, do I buy from here, from there? When will I get this? So our product helps you automate a lot of this and gives it to you in a structured way so that you can do your job faster and better. Similarly, if you sit in the HR function and you're in charge of talent acquisition, well, you put out job descriptions, get a lot of applications, then have to sift through CVs, decide who should go to interview. And usually you're not an expert in all the jobs that you are hiring, right? And so you have to ask a lot of feedback and take a lot of time from the hiring managers, etc., to do this task. Well, with our system, actually, it learns how to do it and just helps you select, let's say, the top 10 that you should take through the first cohort to interview. So yeah, these are, hopefully this helps answer to the question that you had.
And so you mentioned the Falcon model. Is it still, do you still have like a team working for you developing those models, or are they still in the research institute? And do you have researchers working in your team?
So yeah, the Falcon team is part of the research lab. They're still advancing the Falcon program, and they have different models that tackle different modalities in different sizes, etc. Us, we have more applied researchers, right? Like so folks who will help us be at the forefront of what's happening in research so that we can take that to infuse that into our products to serve our partners and customers.
So I'm really curious to understand how you deal with that, because when I talk to CTOs that have both researchers, and by researchers, I mean like applied researchers and developers, usually most software companies have a lot of D and very little R. And for the R part, the research part, they're like, oh my God, how do I give objectives to my researchers? How do we actually make them talk to the developers to transform whatever they are doing, which seems cool, into products, especially when you know that a lot of researchers, they code very badly. They are really focused on their research and they don't really care about products. I'm exaggerating just a bit. So what are the processes and the management methods that you're using to make sure that the researchers are really focused on doing something that will end up in a product that will generate money for the company?
Yeah, it's the usual challenge, right? Like of these types of organizations. And it comes down to the idiosyncrasy of research. Research is an activity that you cannot predict, like when you will get something out of it. It's not linear progress. There are moments where you don't find anything. There are moments where you miraculously find something. Like the Transformers, nobody predicted when it will come, how, why, and same with lots of these other things. I can remember from my time at DeepMind where some of the huge successes for quite some times the teams had to scratch their heads and there were like all these periods of despair where nothing is moving, no metric is moving, and then all of a sudden you have this like jump in the key metric that you follow, and so you get closer to something. So what I'm trying to say there is that the activity of research is very, very special and has to be treated as such. The activity of what you call the D, like development, is more, you can have a plan, you can try to stick to the plan, you can measure progress versus your target and goals. So it's a very, very different way of operating. And usually in this development part, you also have external milestones you have to meet, right? Like partner engagement, customer engagement. You have maybe a sales team that is doing a bunch of activities. So you cannot say, oh, sorry, we didn't find anything. Talk to you next year and let's change the plans. So the way that I've seen this happen is you have to try to help specialize people in what they're best at, and give them the environment and culture that helps them succeed. So if you go to a research org, I mean, you said, yeah, researchers don't necessarily code well. I would mostly also say, like, researchers, you don't want them to code, right? Like, you want them to do other things. So one of the amazing things that I saw in the research lab that I was in is that they gave engineering resources to the research group so that researchers have like tools where they can run experiments where it's very, very efficient. So they can run many, many of them and don't consume tons of compute. They have also people who can take over a bunch of admin tasks. So they don't have to struggle with, oh, I need to find time to meet this person that's chasing me. Or I have to reply to this and that. So you try to specialize people in what they're best at so that you get like the added benefits from putting together all these folks that have strengths in specific areas. Then you try to run these groups with different types of goals and timelines. So a research group, you want to give them like a sales team, like quarterly quotas and the weekly forecast call, and you'll just adapt to the timeline there. And the farther the research is from something that is well known, as in if it's very exploratory, you probably want to have like longer timelines, as in you probably count in half years versus like a product or like a customer facing organization where the timelines are much, much shorter. So you put that in place.
Hold on. Let me cut you here because I'm sure that a startup CTO listening to you is like, yeah, but he's working for a company in Abu Dhabi with unlimited money. And before that, he was at Google with unlimited money. So it's very easy to give like longer time frames to researchers. But now I have my CEO and the board. They're breathing on behind my neck and we have 18 months of runway. So how would you advise this CTO to still invest in research? Because this is how you actually leapfrog competitors, and this is how you can build defensible moats in technology while being able to show something to your CEO and to your board. So how would you apply that to like the very pragmatic startup reality of having the finite runway?
Yeah. Thanks, Daniel, for flagging this like specific point. So look, first, there is no unlimited money anywhere, right? Everything is relative. So like at Google, it's big, but then also the impact to move the needle has to be at that level. I think and I have these conversations with a lot of early stage teams, right? Like that, as you said, they're very small, they're very nimble. They have very tight deadlines and investors who come with like different degrees of patience. So I think there are a few ways, right? Like I think one, you can partner with research labs. So academia, etc. You can have collaborations and then have these guys have a very, very long-term blue sky type approach. And you grab things as you go, or you help them help you solve your own problems. So that is one, right? But it's quite excellent. You have another one where you don't explore too much, right? Like you don't put folks who will just be exploring and trying to find some new breakthrough because you don't have the time, can't dedicate the resources. That wasn't the objective of the company. And if you're asking these questions, then probably you didn't go out to set up a research lab. So you shouldn't be doing that. So you focus on exploitation more of existing things. So that is what we do, right? Like we look at papers that are published. We have people go to conferences. We have some specific problems that we care about. And for those, we work with either our sister team in research, with other research lab or academic labs all over the world, and other like startups that are more research heavy. And we try to like find what helps us, but we don't spend time exploring the realm of possibilities and generate like delays and divert resources and then have people in despair, right? So I think the short answer is either you just have a super tiny team and you ask them to exploit what is already there and keep an eye out on what is happening, or two, you try to build ties with folks who have much longer time frames that are in areas that are very close to you, so that if they spit out something interesting, you can use it for yourself and advance. That's probably the best, at least best advice that I can think of, with the added caveat that if research is important to you, you should go to conferences, you should do reading sessions, check papers, discuss them with your team, follow on Twitter the main researchers that you care about and see what they talk about in the community. So basically be out there in the community and learn and iterate and build on what the open source and open science ecosystem helps you get access to.
And how do you balance the fact that your technology team has to be very much focused on research and looking at what the researchers are publishing and reading papers and basically figuring out technology based on the research, and the commercial impediment of a capitalist company where you have to make money? So how do you reconcile the two? Do you do like techno push and you're, hey, we built this, and you try to sell it to clients? Or do you just listen to clients and then you tell the developers to build something and then for the hell to the research? So where's the right middle?
Yeah, that you constantly have to balance. You cannot pick just one or the other because you might end up in situations you don't want to. The gist of it is this sentence that's attributed to Henry Ford, even if actually apparently it's not Henry Ford who said it. But basically, he allegedly said that if he had asked people what they wanted, they would have replied faster horses, and so nobody would ever have built a car, right? So I think the whole approach is to try to balance different timelines and to do what makes sense for your setup and organization. There are probably phases where, for example, you might have to optimize for runway. Like you have a very short runway, you cannot spend a ton of time doing a ton of things. And so you have to do this short-term optimization to then get more time to think about the broader picture. There are other setups where perhaps you have enough time, and so you shouldn't be just trying to optimize for tomorrow. You should build for the longer term. The balance between the two is that you need to have some long-term plan with some vision and North Star that makes sense to you and that you constantly iterate on and test by engaging with the external world, right? You have to set out with this like mission plan that your organization is bought into, and then you have to break it into steps, right? Like basically your roadmap. And there you have a number of assumptions that you're testing constantly to either say, okay, we were right on this, we can continue this way, or, well, this was not how we thought it would be, and so we have to adjust. This is what we've learned from this interaction. We now are going to go towards this path. I feel that that's a way that builds confidence with yourself and also with your teams, that you are working towards building something that is useful to a big part of folks. And so your company or group or product has a higher chance of succeeding.
And so basically, when doing so, do you have like a roadmap, or how do you really focus the team? Because now the AI is all over the place, and you mentioned that you're working with education and you're working with maybe financial services and other verticals. So how are you organizing your roadmap? Or how are you identifying the use cases where you want to build products and where you think that you can beat the hundreds or thousands of AI companies that are popping out everywhere? So what are the bets that you're placing, and how do you do them? How do you define those bets?
Yeah, it's a super exciting time, right? Like with a lot of people trying out a lot of things here and there. Where we went to is what makes sense for us, right? And I shared with you like our origins, where we came from, and what made sense for us back then was to build agents that help automate work in the enterprise and then unleash productivity gains for everyone. And so the way that we've organized ourselves is that from a technical perspective, the systems are not ready, right? Like agents that actually work, we are not there yet. It depends on the complexity of your agent, but these things are like a combination of reasoning engine and the ability to call a bunch of tools, do loops until you figure it out and have some guardrails in there. Well, the more loops you do, the higher the likelihood that it breaks, right? And so there's first this need to keep figuring out how these things work. There is second, which is the value comes from solving someone's specific problem. And so you have to understand where exactly to start. And then the third part is this adoption point we discussed, where everybody has been told do AI stuff. And so in all companies, they're doing AI stuff, but a lot of folks don't actually know what this AI stuff is. And so you have to help educate and come in with the tools that we have been assembling to help them through the journey, right? So you put all of this together, and where you end up is, well, one, from a technical perspective, all these tools look a bit alike. From a go to market perspective, you have to talk to people in their own language. If you go talk to a bank, it's different from if you talk to an airline. They have different problems, but the technologies that are helping to solve these are pretty much the same. So we have like our go-to-market team and our PMs, etc. They help, and product marketing and all these folks. They help to fine-tune the message to the audience, and we also learn from these interactions as people react to the way that we explain what we do to them, and then we reintegrate that in the way that we come across. So this is how we are organizing ourselves, right? Like one, build the foundations and the building blocks for these systems, then iterate with a few select design partners in given verticals to like fine tune them and specialize them for these areas, and help with the adoption challenge so that people can see the value that comes through doing these projects versus just reporting at the quarterly financial call. We have 72 AI projects across the company. And then the next quarter, say we have 125 AI projects across the company, when no one knows actually what these AI projects are and what they have helped achieve.
And so you started by saying that the technology is not there yet completely to run agents. And anyone familiar with AI knows that, well, generative AI is non-deterministic. So you cannot really completely be sure of the output, and you don't want to have agents hallucinating and doing bizarre stuff and messing with databases or documents or even clients. So what's the guardrails that you're currently building, and how are you helping clients basically be comfortable in rolling out agents in a safe way?
Yeah, you're absolutely right on the fact that AI is by nature stochastic, right? Like it's a probabilistic, these are probabilistic systems that are being built. And so you have to take that into account. It's a very different way of building software and products than previously. So there are a few things that you can add in your thinking process to build confidence and pick where to start. First is, there are probably areas where hallucinations are a huge problem, and so you need to be extra careful. While there are others where hallucination is actually not an issue, and sometimes it's even something that you want. If I explain this a bit more or unpack this, is if we are in healthcare and you hallucinate and give the wrong treatment, it's actually really, really bad, right? Same if you're in fields like finance or insurance, etc. These are like very education. It's really terrible to hallucinate. If you're in fields that are more on the creative side, it is okay if you hallucinate, actually. You can even think of it as part of the creative process. Like if the hat is green instead of yellow, like no one will die, right? So this is the first thing, is you try to figure out, you use different guardrails and thresholds for different use cases. Then for those that are high risk, there you will add guardrails to the system, where you will probably try to like limit the ability to make up an answer. You might like do a bit of prompt engineering to force the model not to hallucinate or say something that is absolutely wrong. You might build systems that check the work of the system that you have built so that you have extra protection. You might add humans in the loop also for some cases, so that you can try to guarantee as much as possible that you are not creating issues. And you can also add the ability to access tools, right? For example, you can retrieve information from just a specific knowledge base and say it has to be there. You can add linkages to ensure consistency and grounding. So there are ways, right, like to approach this really, really important problem that you highlighted.
And what's your view on what's going to happen next? So right now, some people are saying that AI is just a fad, and generative AI is a gadget for techies and all those companies that are investing millions or billions. Everything is going to crumble. And so, what's your personal view? So I'm sure that you might be somehow bullish because that's your field, but I'm really more interested into understanding how do you think that those technologies are going to evolve in a few years and how we're going to live in a post agent era in enterprises.
Yeah, the we are at like the really really early days of this, right? Like it currently it looks like magic. Like there are things that you couldn't do before that you're able to do, and you're still understanding how it works. So it's a bit of alchemy, right? Like even as in like before chemistry, and people understood exactly how these atoms worked and how you did new compounds based on others you had previously. We're kind of in that phase where we're tinkering with this and trying to learn and figure out how it works. So if you think about this and try to extrapolate what might happen, well, one is in things that are text based, we have a architecture that works incredibly well. And as it has been scaled, it has kept on improving. And on top of it, we found ways to make it more efficient, as in reduce cost, make it increase quality, which is all the inference time compute type techniques. And there is more and more efficiency and quality gains that should happen as people learn how to use these things. Then you have other modalities, right? Like there's huge progress in images, video, the robotics space has benefited a lot from this. Areas like science with like biology, etc. There's now all the world models side of it so that we can help these things have a model of the world and interact with it. So I think there are challenges, right? Like from the compute side of things, energy, data, etc. But overall, it's been a few years of incredibly rapid progress, and from a research perspective. And now there's a lot of work happening in the application side of things, right? Like there's so many things that we can do with what we have now, even if we stopped finding new things. There are questions around like what are the best UIs for these things? Is it just are we going to be limited at chatbots or are there others? And of course there are like many, many others, right? There are questions about the uses, like how do we use this? If I do sales, how can I completely change the work that I do by integrating this in my daily life? If I'm an exec, how do I tap into the power of these systems and like help me push the thinking about how to run my company or think about opportunities? If I'm in the education space, like how do I help increase the quality of the education that I give to my country or the whole population? If I'm in health, how do I increase population health? How do I give people access to systems that can help do diagnosis like the best doctor in the world for like a fraction of the cost? So the way that I think about it is that researchers and research labs have given us like incredible toys to play with. They are still focused on the next steps there, but from an applications point of view, there is so much that we can already do with this, and we keep learning over and over. So you should see that probably the next 5-10 years are going to be about changing the tech stack that we had in companies before and replacing by like these new tools now that we start to figure out how to integrate them in there.
Yeah, but you're still mentioning tools. And do you really think that we're still going to have humans managing tools? So, in a sense of the tool, which is an extension of the human, or do you think that we can really see autonomous agents that are doing things on their own without any humans in the loop or humans using the tool?
Yeah, no, like the there's a future where a bit like we started to use calculators, and so we stopped calculating. We will use other things, and then in some areas, these things will there are tasks that we don't even need to do. Like if I want to book like a movie. Like a movie ticket today, I have to go to a website on my phone. I have to enter a bunch of things. Yeah, tomorrow I should just tell my phone to do it for me, and I shouldn't even care about like what happened next, right? And we saw this, when we were working with uh, at Google in the team that I mentioned to you that we worked closely with like business units at Google to infuse deep learning everywhere. These are teams where you have on the Google side, right? Like think of YouTube, have like incredible engineers that have been doing a ton of work, understand their space really well. So we'd show up with our engineers and we start to help like replace if then statements by neural nets, like drop neural nets a bit everywhere. We had tons of lines of code. And the what happened is that it is not that they reduced the number of engineers in those teams. Actually, those engineers moved on to do other things. And so I think similarly, right, like there was stuff we used to do that will be offloaded to digital systems. We will move on probably to do other things. And in a company in the future, and that's what we believe in and we're working towards and helping our partners get through this transition, is there will be a combination of human intelligence and artificial intelligence in the sense of digital systems and computers that work together for better outcomes. And as you said, like it's not just a human with a digital assistant. It is probably that I will have colleagues in a meeting that are digital and I'm having conversation with them and they're having conversation between themselves and maybe they're in different parts of the organization. And so a potential future is one where like the pyramid in a company, right? Like is one where you have a combination of humans, digital systems, they work together and there are different parts of the processes and of the chain. And that is what we have to figure out in the next few years, right? Like is how do we benefit from all these technology to give meaning to the work that everybody is doing and benefit from these new capabilities that are being unleashed.
Um, so let's keep talking about the future. I know that you're an angel investor and that you invested either directly or indirectly with a few funds in startups. So can you tell us what do you find really exciting right now? What are the startups that, without necessarily naming them, but just to understand like the topics that you think that are really interesting and that we should look closely?
Yeah, without big surprise, it is everything about this transition, right? Like of how do you harness the power of these AI systems to actually effect change and improve ways of working, create completely new fields. So in that, everything that is happening in vertical AI, right? Like a legal company where you have a lot more intelligence that comes from the digital systems or in health, right? Like where you can massively offload or the admin burden from the teams there, etc. Then you have fields that are like way more closer to science. So I mentioned quickly biology, but it is pretty incredible what you could do with such system to help you design drugs, design clinical trials, increase the throughput of finding like new medicine. There are things in even further fields of like robotics, right? Like, are you able to get robots to learn and decrease the cost that you used to have to retrain robots every time you needed to change the task that they were supposed to do? There are things in the in like field like space, right? Like I didn't know much about it until I met a few folks in through the ecosystem, right? And somebody one day told me, you know, there is a lot happening in space, and then he started to explain a bunch of things. And it's really fascinating the things that we do there. I encourage everybody to have a look and check it out. There are also still a lot of fundamental research questions that would benefit from dedicated efforts. If you think about like DeepMind's vision of this Apollo program for AI and the idea the founders had of if you were to give researchers and engineers and others like massive resources and focus to be able to see how much progress would happen in the field. And I think they were absolutely right given the past decade. Well, today we're in this like exploitation paradigm of we found a lot of breakthroughs in research and now we're exploiting them to build systems on top. I think we shouldn't lose sight of the value of exploration in research. So funding research labs that can help find like the next breakthroughs, I think that's also a great idea. And there's another one maybe I'll throw in there, which is around like the sovereignty trend, right? Like there in lots of countries and regions of the world are waking up to this challenge of the world is maybe deglobalizing. It's important to control your own destiny, etc. So I think in from fields all the way from manufacturing to agriculture, science, compute infrastructure, etc. I think it's very interesting to see what's developing in this area and support the exceptional founders who are trying to build in this context.
And that's actually a perfect transition to my last question, which goes back to the first question about being in the Middle East and in the UAE. So why do you think that being in the UAE and the Middle East is a forward-thinking region for AI, and what makes you bullish about the UAE?
Yeah, look, there are lots of things, right? Like, so first, it's a part of the world where it is very new, right? Like a lot of countries got their independence or were formed in the 70s after a few others. And so they are not encumbered by their past and they're very focused on the future and are keen to build their countries and be part of the global ecosystem. They also are very conscious of the fact that the oil reserves are not forever and that the world is transitioning in one way or another from fossil fuel. And so they are keen to diversify, right? And in that diversification, they have put the knowledge economy as a huge area of focus. If I take the example of the UAE, in 2016, they appointed a minister of AI. So this is like almost a decade ago, right? And since then, they have been not only planning but executing on that plan, which had we're going to have a research center, we're going to start there, then we'll do application companies, we'll build partnerships all over the world with companies like Microsoft and others. We'll do the first or second Stargate in the country, right? So there's a massive compute deployment. So that is the second part, is there is a huge push to be a player, to contribute to this, to put the region on the map of AI and be part of the global push towards more science and knowledge, etc. And then the last thing I would throw in is that combined with this, over the past few years, there's been a massive influx of folks from all over the world who have relocated there. They all came from different reasons, right? I joined family there, but folks from the Russia-Ukraine war and other folks from like the Asia that came after like a bunch of challenges that happened there. So you have like more and more talent that is coming in there, and it comes at the same time as they are making this massive investment in the fields, and where also some of the seed that they had put in, we want to be in research, we want to build application companies on top, we want to attract universities. So you have campuses of universities from both US, Europe, and also from Asia that have their campuses there. And so people now, before people would like have to go abroad to study, now they don't need to. There are more people who come to study there. So I think the combination of a forward-looking leadership with a focus on the knowledge economy, AI, technology, and a bunch of investments that were done from before to cement all this, combined with a certain stability, makes it a really, really great place for the future in the field that we are in.
Cool. Thanks for that. Now, because we're at the end, I just have a few questions, very short questions. You have to answer them without thinking too much about them, and we'll end there. So, are you ready for the questions?
Yeah,
All
go
right,
ahead.
let's start. So first, what's the most important piece of your technological stack?
It's probably the knowledge base management system.
Why?
It is because that is where all the data resides, right?
Mm.
Like basically what we do is ingest data, reason on it, and then give back the insights in the right UI. If the data is crap or you missed some data or you're unable to really process that properly, then everything in the chain will not be where you want it to be.
The best book you've ever read, whether a technical book or a book that helped you professionally?
Probably my history books of high school. I just love history and it helped me read a lot more books about history. So I'll go back to those.
Okay, cool. History. A tech decision that you're proud you made early.
Of being LLM agnostic.
and one that you regret.
Of not, it's not really a tech one, but it's of not having raised the flag of search powered by LLMs earlier, or having raised it, but of not having pushed more.
And the last question is, can you share something that you believe strongly, and yet still a lot of people don't really believe in that? Something really contrarian that you really believe in.
Yeah, I think, look, I think we touched on it and discussed a lot. I think I really believe that this phase of AI will require a lot more humans than less. And so I think we will need way more humans in this next phase, and we'll have to involve a lot more people to help through the change than most folks seem to be saying.
Cool. Then still hopeful for the human race. Great. Mehdi, it was really fascinating talking to you today. Thank you very much for your time. And we wish you a lot of continuous exciting AI projects.
Thanks so much, Daniel. It was a pleasure to chat. Looking forward to hearing more of these episodes.
Cool, definitely.